All right, we're on part 5 today, I believe. Hope you're all doing good. See my new setup? Love it. Let me know. Okay. Damn, wasn't the last one kind of a bummer? Okay. You had to look twice to see it, this door. It was painted the same color as the gallery walls, the kind of door which in normal circumstances looked like it would be kept locked. It had only caught my attention because it wasn't completely closed. The left side wasn't flush with the wall. Whether because it hadn't caught properly or because the lock wasn't working with the electricity out, I didn't know. Still, it was not easy to get open. It was heavy, steel, and I had to pull with all my strength. Suddenly, with a gasp, it gave so capriciously I stumbled. Squeezing through, I found myself in a dark office hallway under a much lower ceiling. The emergency lights were much weaker than in the main gallery, and it took my eyes a moment to adjust. The hallway seemed to stretch for miles. Fearfully, I crept along, peering into the office where the doors happened to stand ajar. Cameron Geisler, registrar. Miyako Fujita, assistant registrar. Drawers were open and chairs were pushed away from desks. In the doorway of one office, a woman's high-heel shoe lay on its side. The air of abandonment was unspeakably eerie. It seemed that far in the distance I could hear police sirens, maybe even walkie-talkies and dogs, but my ears were ringing so hard from the explosion that I thought I might well be hearing things. It was starting to unnerve me more and more that I had seen no firemen, no cops, no security guards. In fact, not a single living soul. It wasn't dark enough for the keychain flashlight in the staff-only area, but neither was there nearly enough light for me to see as well. I was in some sort of a records or storage area. The offices were lined with filing cabinets, floor to ceiling, metal shelves with plastic mailroom crates and cardboard boxes. The narrow corridor made me feel edgy, closed in, and my footsteps echoed so crazily that once or twice I stopped and turned around to see if somebody was coming down the hall after me. "Hello?" I said, tentatively glancing into some of the rooms as I passed. Some of the offices were modern and spare. Others were crowded and dirty-looking, with untidy stacks of papers and books. Florence, Clowner, Department of Musical Instruments, Morris, Orabrausel, Islamic Arts, Victoria Gabetti, Textiles. I passed a cavernous dark room with a long workshop table where mismatched scraps of cloth were laid out like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. In the back of the room was a jumble of rolling garments, racks with lots of plastic garment bags hanging off them, like racks by the service elevators at Bendel or Bergdorf's. At the T-junction, I looked this way and that, not knowing where to turn. I smelled floor wax, turpentine, and chemicals, a tang of smoke. Offices and workshops stretched out to infinity in all directions. A contained geometrical network, fixed and featureless. To my left, light flickered from a ceiling fixture. It hummed and caught in a staticky fit, and in the trembling glow, I saw the drink fountain down the hall. I ran for it, so fast my feet almost slid out from underneath me, and gulped with my mouth pressed against the spigot, so much cold water, so fast that a spike of pain slid into my temple. Hiccuping, I rinsed the blood from my hand and splashed water in my sore eyes. Tiny splinters of glass, almost invisible, tinkled to the steel tray of the fountain like needles of ice. I leaned against the wall, the overhead fluorescent vibrating spitting on and off made me feel queasy. With effort, I pulled myself up again. On I walked, wobbling a bit in the unstable flicker. Things were looking decidedly more industrial in this direction. Wooden panels and wooden pallets, a flatbed pushcart, a sense of crated objects being moved and stored. I passed another junction where a slick, shadowy passageway receded into darkness. And I was just about to walk past it and keep going when I saw a red glow at the end that said exit. I tripped. I fell over my feet. I got up again, still hiccuping, and ran down the endless hall. Down at the end of the corridor was a door with a metal bar, like the security door at my school. I pushed it open with a bark. Down a dark stairwell I ran, 12 steps, a turn at the landing, then 12 steps at the bottom. My fingertips skimming the metal rail, shoes clattering and echoing so crazily that it sounded like half a dozen people were running with me. At the foot of the steps was a gray institutional corridor with another barred door. I threw myself against it, pushed it open with both hands, and was slapped hard in the face by rain and deafening wails of sirens. I think I might have screamed out loud. I was so happy to be outside, though nobody could have heard me in all that noise. I might as well have been trying to scream over jet engines on the tarmac at LaGuardia during a thunderstorm. It sounded like every fire truck, every cop car, every ambulance and emergency vehicle in 5 boroughs plus Jersey was howling and caterwauling out of Fifth Avenue. A deliriously happy noise, like New Year's and Christmas and 4th of July fireworks were all rolled into one. The exit had spat me out in Central Park, through a deserted side door between the loading docks and the parking garage. Footpaths stood in the empty gray-green distance. Treetops plunged white, tossing and foaming in the wind. Beyond, on the rain-swept street, Fifth Avenue was blocked off. Through the downpour from where I stood, I could just see the great bright bombardment of activity. Cranes and heavy equipment, cops pushing the crowds back, red lights, yellow and blue lights, flares that beat and whirled and flashed in quicksilver confusion. I put my elbow up to keep the rain out of my face and took off running through the empty park. Rain drove in my eyes and dripped down my forehead, melting the lights on the avenue to a blur that pulsed in the distance. NYPD, FDNY, parked city vans with the windshield wipers going, K9, Rescue Operation Battalion, NYC Hazmat, black rain slickers flashed and billowed in the wind. A band of yellow crime scene tape was stretched across the exit of the park at the Miners' Gate. Without hesitation, I lifted it up and ducked underneath it and ran out into the midst of the crowd. In all the welter, nobody noticed me. For a moment or two, I ran uselessly back and forth in the street, rain peppering in my face. Everywhere I looked, images of my own panic dashed past. People chorused and surged around me blindly. Cops, firemen, guys in hard hats. An elderly man cradling a broken elbow and a woman with a bloody nose being shooed down 79th Street by a distracted policeman. I had never seen so many fire trucks in one place. Squad 18, Fighting 44, New York Ladder 7, Rescue 1, 4-truck, Pride of Midtown. Pushing through the sea of parked vehicles in official black raincoats, I stopped at Hatzola ambulance. Excuse me. Hebrew letters on the back. A little light hospital room visible through the open doors. Attendants were bending over a woman, trying to press her down as she struggled to sit up. A wrinkled hand with red fingernails clawed at the air. I beat on the window with my fist. "You need to get back inside," I yelled. "People are still in there." "There's another bomb," yelled the attendant without looking at me. "We have to evacuate." Before I had time to register this, a gigantic cop swooped down on me like a thunderclap. A thick-headed, bulldogish guy with pumped-up arms like a weightlifter's. He grabbed me roughly by the upper arm and began to hustle and shove me to the other side of the street. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he bellowed, drowning out my protest as I tried to wrench free. "Sir," a bloody-faced woman coming up, trying to get his attention. "Sir, I think my hand is broken." "Get back from the building," he screamed at her, throwing her arm off and then at me. "Go!" But with both hands he shoved me so hard I staggered and nearly fell. "Get back from the building," he screamed, throwing up his arms with the flap of his rain slicker. "Now!" He wasn't even looking at me. His small, bearish eyes were riveted on something going on over my head, up the street, and the expression on his face terrified me. In haste, I dodged through the crowd of emergency workers to the opposite sidewalk, just above 79th Street. Keeping an eye out for my mother, though I didn't see her, ambulances and medical vehicles galore. Beth Israel Emergency, Lenox Hill, NY Presbyterian, Cabrini EMS paramedic. A bloody man in a business suit lay flat on his back behind an ornamental yew hedge in the tiny fenced yard on a Fifth Avenue mansion. A yellow security tape was strung up, snapping and popping in the wind, but the rain-drenched cops and firemen and guys in hard hats were lifting it up and ducking back and forth under it as if it weren't even there. All eyes were turned uptown, and only later I would learn why. On 84th Street, too far away for me to see, the hazmat cops were in the process of disrupting an undetonated bomb by shooting it with a water cannon. Intent on talking to someone, trying to find out what had happened, I tried to push my way towards a fire truck, but cops were charging through the crowds, waving their arms, clapping their hands, beating people back. I caught hold of a fireman's coat, a young, gum-chewing, friendly-looking guy. "Somebody's still in there. Somebody's still in there," I screamed. Yeah, we know," shouted the fireman without looking at me. "They ordered us out. They're telling us 5 minutes. They're letting us back in." A swift push in the back. "Move, move," I heard someone scream, a rough voice heavily accented. "Get your hands off me. Now, everybody get moving." Everybody else pushed me in the back. Firemen leaned off the ladder trucks, looking up towards the Temple of Dendir. Cops stood tensely, shoulder to shoulder, impassive in the rain. Stumbling past them, swept along by the current, I saw glazed eyes, heads nodding, feet unconsciously tapping out the countdown. By the time I heard the crack of the disrupted bomb and the Horse football stadium cheer rising from Fifth Avenue, I had already been swept well along towards Madison. Traffic cops, were windmilling their arms, pushing the stream of stunned people back. "Come on, people, move it, move it." They plowed through the crowd, clapping their hands. "Everybody east, everybody east." One cop, a big guy with a goatee and an earring, like a professional wrestler, reached out and shoved a delivery guy in a hoodie who was trying to take a picture on his cell phone, so that he stumbled into me and nearly knocked me over. "Watch it," screamed the delivery man in a high, ugly voice, and the cop shoved him again. This time was so hard he fell on his back in the gutter. "Are you deaf or what, buddy?" he yelled. "Get going. Don't touch me. How about I bust your head open?" Between 5th and Madison, it was a madhouse. Whop of helicopter rotors overhead, indistinct talking on a bullhorn. Though 79th Street was closed to traffic, it was packed with cop cars, fire trucks, cement barricades, and throngs of screaming, panicky, dripping wet people. Some of them were running from Fifth Avenue. Some were trying to muscle and press their way back towards the museum. Some people held cell phones aloft, attempting to snap pictures. Others stood motionless with their jaws dropped at the crowds as the crowd surged around them, staring up at the black smoke in the rainy skies over Fifth Avenue as if the Martians were coming down. Sirens, white smoke billowing from the subway vents. A homeless man wrapped in a dirty blanket wandered back and forth, looking eager and confused. I looked around, hopefully for my mother in the crowd, fully expecting to see her. For a short time, I tried to swim upstream against the cop-driven current, standing on my toes, craning to see, until I realized it was hopeless to push back and try to look for her in the torrential rain, that mob. I'll just see her at home, I thought. Home was where we were supposed to meet. Home was the emergency arrangement. She must have realized how useless it would be trying to find me in all that crush. But still, I felt a petty, irrational pang of disappointment. And as I walked home, skull-cracking headache, practically seeing double, I kept looking for her, scanning the anonymous, preoccupied faces around me. She'd gotten out, that was the important thing. She'd been rooms away from the worst part of the explosion. None of the bodies was her. But no matter what we had agreed upon beforehand, no matter how much sense it made, I somehow still couldn't quite believe she had walked away from the museum without me. That was chapter 1. All right. Woo! The big book. Okay. I'm going to start chapter 2. Chapter 2. The anatomy lesson. When I was little, 4 or 5, my greatest fear was that someday my mother might not come home from work. Addition and subtraction were useful mainly insofar as they helped me track her movements. How many minutes till she left the office, how many minutes to walk from office to subway. And even before I'd learned to count, I'd been obsessed with learning how to read a clock face, desperately studying the occult circle crayoned on the paper plate that once mastered would unlock the pattern of her comings and goings. Usually she was home just when she said she'd be, so if she was 10 minutes late, I began to fret. Any later, and I sat on the floor by the front of the door of the apartment like a puppy left alone too long, straining to hear the rumble of the elevator coming up to our floor. Almost every day in elementary school, I heard things on the Channel 7 news that worried me. What if some bum in a dirty fatigue jacket pushed my mother onto the tracks while she was waiting for the 6 train? Or muscled her into a dark doorway and stabbed her for her pocketbook? What if she dropped her hairdryer in the bathtub, or got knocked in front of a car by a bicycle, or was given the wrong medicine at the dentist and died, as had happened to the mother of a classmate of mine? To think of something happening to my mother was especially frightening because my dad was so unreliable. Unreliable, I guess, is the diplomatic way of putting it. Even when he was in a good mood, he did things like lose his paycheck and fall asleep with the front door open to the apartment open because he drank. And when he was in a bad mood, which was much of the time, he was red-eyed and clammy-looking, his suit so rumpled it looked like he'd been rolling on the floor in it, and an air of unnatural stillness emanating from him as far as some pressurized article about to explode. Though I didn't understand why he was so unhappy, it was clear to me that his unhappiness was our fault. My mother and I got on his nerves. It was because of us he had a job he couldn't stand. Everything we did was irritating. He particularly didn't enjoy being around me. Not that he often was. In the mornings as I got ready for school, he sat puffy-eyed and silent over his coffee, with the Wall Street Journal in front of him, his bathrobe open and his hair standing up in cowlicks, and sometimes he was so shaky that the cup sloshed as he brought it up to his mouth. Warily he eyed me when I came in, nostrils flaring if I made too much noise with the silverware or cereal bowl. Apart from this daily awkwardness, I didn't see him much. He didn't eat dinner with us or attend school functions. He didn't play with me or talk to me a lot when he was home. In fact, he was seldom home at all until after my bedtime. And some days, paydays especially, every other Friday, he didn't come clattering in until 3 or 4 in the morning, banging the door, dropping his briefcase, crashing and bumping around so erratically that sometimes I bolted awake in terror, staring at the glow-in-the-dark planetarium stars on the ceiling and wondering if a killer had broken into the apartment. Luckily, when he was drunk, his footsteps slowed to a jarring and unmistakable cadence, Frankenstein steps, as I thought of them, deliberate and clumping, with absurdly long pauses between each footfall. And as soon as I realized it was only him thudding around out there in the dark, and not some serial murderer or psychopath, I would drift back into a fretful doze. The following days, Saturday, my mother and I would contrive to be out of the apartment before he woke from his sweaty, tangled sleep on the sofa. Otherwise, we would spend the whole day creeping around, afraid of shutting the door too loudly or disturbing him in any way, while he sat stony-faced in front of the television with a Chinese beer from the takeout place and a glassy look in his eyes, watching the news or sports with the sound off. Consequently, neither my mother nor I had been overly troubled when we woke up one Saturday and found he hadn't come home at all. It was Sunday before we started getting concerned, and even then we didn't worry. We didn't worry the way you normally would. It was the start of the college football season. It was a pretty sure thing that he had money on some of the games, and we thought he'd gotten on the bus and gone to Atlantic City without telling us. Not until the following day, when my father's secretary, Loretta, called because he hadn't shown up to work, did it start to appear that something was seriously wrong. My mother, fearing he'd been robbed or killed coming out drunk from a bar, phoned the police, and we spent several tense days waiting for a phone call or a knock on the door. Then, towards the end of the week, a sketchy note from my dad arrived, postmarked Newark, New Jersey, informing us in a high-strung scrawl that he was heading off to start a new life in an undisclosed location. I remember pondering the phrase "new life" as if it actually might reveal some hint of where he'd gone. For after I'd badgered and clamored and pestered my mother for about a week, she'd finally consented to let me see the letter myself. "Well, all right," she said resignedly, as she opened her desk drawer and fished it out. "I don't know what he expects me to tell you. You might as well hear it from him." It was written on stationery from a DoubleTree Inn near the airport. I believed it might contain valuable clues to his whereabouts, but instead, I was struck by its extreme brevity, 4 or 5 lines, and its speedy, careless go-to-hell sprawl, like something he'd dashed off before running out to the grocery store. In many respects, it was a relief to have my father out of the picture. Certainly I didn't miss him much, and my mother didn't seem to miss him either, though it was sad when she had to let go of our housekeeper, Cynthia. Sad when she had to let our housekeeper, Cynthia, go because we couldn't afford to pay her. Cynthia had cried and offered to stay and work for free, but my mother had found her a part-time job in a building, working for a couple with a baby. Once a week or so, she stopped in to visit my mother for a cup of coffee, still in the smock she wore over her clothes when she cleaned. Without fanfare, the photo of a younger, suntanned dad atop a ski clip came down from the wall and was replaced by one of my mother and me at the rink in Central Park. At night, my mother sat up late with a calculator going over bills. Even though the apartment was rent stabilized, getting by without my dad's salary was a month-to-month adventure, since whatever new life he'd fashioned for himself elsewhere did not include sending money for child support. Basically, we were content enough doing our own laundry down in the basement, going to matinees instead of full-price movies, eating day-old baked goods and cheap Chinese carryouts, noodles, egg foo young, and counting out nickels and dimes for bus fares. But as I trudged home from the museum that day, cold, wet, with a tooth-crunching headache. It struck me that with my dad gone, no one in the world would be particularly worried about my mother or me. No one was sitting around wondering where we'd been all morning or why they hadn't heard from us. Wherever he was, off in his new life, tropics or prairie, tiny ski town, or major American city, major American city, he would certainly be riveted to the television, and it was easy to imagine that maybe he was even getting a little frantic and wound up, as he sometimes did over big news stories that had absolutely nothing to do with him. Hurricanes and bridge collapses in distant states. But would he be worried enough to call and check on us? Probably not. No more than he would be likely to call his old office to see what was happening. Though certainly he would be thinking of his ex-colleagues in Midtown and wondering how all the bean counters and pencil pushers, as he referred to his co-workers, were faring at 101 Park. Were the secretaries getting scared, gathering their pictures off their desk and putting on their walking shoes and going home? Or was it turning into a subdued party of sorts on the 14th floor, people ordering in sandwiches and gathering around the television in the conference room? Though the walk home took forever, I don't remember much about it except a certain gray, cold, rain-shrouded mood on Madison Avenue. Umbrellas bobbing, the crowds on the sidewalk flowing silently downtown, a sense of huddled anonymity like old black and white photos I'd seen of bank crashes and breadlines in the 1930s. My headache and the rain constricted the world to such a tight stick circle that I saw little more than the hunchbacks of people ahead of me on the sidewalk. In fact, my head hurt so badly that I could hardly see where I was going at all. And a couple times I was nearly hit by cars when I plowed into the crosswalk without paying attention to the light. Nobody appeared to know exactly what had happened, though I overheard North Korea blaring from the radio of a parked cab, and Iran and Al-Qaeda muttered by a number of passerby. And a scrawny black man with dreadlocks drenched to the bone was pacing back and forth out in front of the Whitney Museum, jabbing at the air with his fists and shouting to nobody in particular, "Buckle up, Manhattan, Osama bin Laden is rocking us again." Though I felt faint, I wanted to sit down. I kept hobbling along with the hitch in my step like a partially broken toy. Cops gestured, cops whistled and beckoned, water dripped off the end of my nose. Over and over, blinking the rain from my eyes, the thought coursed through my mind, I had to get home to see my mother as soon as I could. She would be waiting frantically for... I had to get home to my mother as soon as I could. She would be waiting frantically for me in the apartment. She would be tearing her hair out with worry, cursing herself for having taken my phone. Everyone was having problems getting their calls through the pedestrians. And pedestrians were lying 10 and 20 deep at the few payphones on the street. Mother, I thought, mother, trying to send her a psychic message that I was alive. I wanted her to know that I was all right, but at the same time, I remember telling myself it was okay I was walking instead of running. I didn't want to pass out on the way home. How lucky that she had walked away only a few moments before. She had sent me directly into the heart of the explosion. She was sure to think I was dead. All right. Bummer. All right, guys. We finished chapter 1 up finally after 5 parts. I think the reading was better today. Anyways, see you for part 6.